My name is Bruce Clark. I'm a Detective Chief Inspector with Norfolk Constabulary, and I work in the safeguarding investigations, and I work within a team that safeguards children, especially children that have been victims of child exploitation. And when I talk about children and young people, I talk about under 18-year-olds as being children and young people. Some of the key warning signs where children and young people are being exploited is that change of behaviour. And if they are beginning to be isolated from their own family or peer group, friendship group, often exclusion from school, behaviour at school, manifesting in behavioural issues and exclusions as well, can be a trigger point and a factor in children's behavioural change. Alienating themselves from their family, being secretive as well, and often being secretive online as well, so not allowing parents or people with parental responsibility just to keep an eye on their online activity as well. We often look at children that have had a good, strong friendship group through the formative years at school and then been drifting away from that friendship group, and what the reasons for that we would look at. Exploiters that wish to exploit children and young people will often seek out some of the most vulnerable children within our communities. And these children that could have had really traumatic lived experiences as victims of crime themselves or witnesses of crime, we do have children that would look to thrill seek or look for new opportunities, and we must recognise as well it's really difficult growing up as children, isn't it? And children will look for opportunities and thrill seeking without necessarily recognising the risks within that. These perpetrators of the exploitation will take advantage of that. They will often use manipulation and techniques of manipulation to lure these children and young people in. And often we see that in sexual exploitation, where predominantly young girls have been asked to share images, and that can be used as a manipulative point, an exploitative point as well. Technology really has impacted on exploitation. It's allowed people to be exploited from their bedrooms. It's allowed perpetrators to come into safe spaces, to come into school, to come into homes, even into children's bedrooms, because that's where social media is. And we often see some secretive activity. And I speak about sometimes we will be dealing with children that have kept a mobile phone or a device away from their parents, and it's through that device that they are in communication with these perpetrators of exploitation as well. Social media can seem very instant to a child. Lots of teenagers, the majority of our teenagers, will have such a social network online and they will live their lives online, but they perhaps don't understand the risks about who they are talking to and actually the longer lasting effects of decisions made online will have in the longer term on their well-being. Which groups are at most risk of being exploited? So we would always look at some of the most vulnerable children in our communities as being at risk of exploitation. And it's those children without the strong family background, without those strong family and peer networks, but not exclusively so. We often deal with children from some very secure, loving backgrounds that will be drawn into exploitation, whether it be through sexual exploitation or criminality as well. And we often find children have not told their parents about the trauma that they're going through because they wish to protect their loved ones at home. So some of the challenges that law enforcement and children's services, social services will identify is the child victim does not recognise themselves as being exploited. They do not recognise themselves as being a victim of exploitation. Often as well, there's a source of income. If they've been drawn into criminality, they're being given something for a service. And often that service would be dealing drugs. And they're being given money. That will maybe be a real driver and a real factor in them wishing to continue with the criminality. And exploiters will exploit upon that. Of course they will. They will be giving money to these children and young people, and often amounts that these children have never seen before. Communities can play a really strong and valuable part in the recognition and identification of exploitation. People in school environments will see this change of behaviour at a very early stage. Healthcare professionals may see that through children presenting with injuries. So professionals have got a part to play within our communities to recognise and call out exploitation. What resources are available? So we've clearly got the police resources available. We've clearly got children's services, but the families are a really important part in supporting and safeguarding young children. And the parent's voice, or the voice of the adult in the child's life, is a really, really important part for them to have a voice in how we go about safeguarding these children. And also the voice of the child. I mean, what are the factors? What are the push-pull factors? What is drawing this child into exploitation? Or what is pushing this child away from a safe environment into a more risky environment? And often the best information that we can get is from the child themselves, who will tell us, well, this is what's happened. This is who I've met. This is how I got into this. This is my journey. And that's really incredibly important for us to learn, listen to the voice of the child, their lived experience. Emerging trends and new forms of exploitation. Some of the emerging threats that I'm really worried about is what we would consider to be gang culture. So drawing children into a gang environment for criminality. It's a bit more about belonging, about ownership, power, and often a business model in selling drugs. So we are really looking to understand what gang culture looks like in Norfolk. We're looking to really proactively address that through criminality and targeting criminals that seek to exploit children into gangs. And we are really attacking the drug culture as a really disruptive feature within our communities. So some of the longer impacts on these children are quite obvious. If they have been involved in criminality, the high chances are that they will have come to the police's attention, and that will be through arrest and through us taking them through the criminal justice system. If a child has used a knife on someone else, that's an extremely serious offence that will and can have ramifications on their life for many, many years to come. So an instant episode in their life could have an impact that lasts many, many years. You've also got another impact in the breakdown of trust within families. These children have perhaps alienated themselves from their families. Families don't know how to and have struggled to cope, so those relationships have broke down, often at the most vulnerable times in their formative adolescent years when they need those relationships to be strong and influential and positive. We sometimes see children replicating criminality that they've witnessed themselves. So if they've grown up in a household where violence is prevalent, domestic abuse, we see particularly girls who have been exploited into sending images or into sexual activity will have lasting effects on relationships, on trust, and how they view themselves as individuals. There's a couple of things I'd like to expand upon, and that's some of the tactics that we will use. And some of those tactics that we will use to interrupt the harm around the child. I've spoken about the child often not considering themselves to be victims. So it is up to us as adults, and certainly the lead agency in the police, to protect the children and place protective measures, safeguarding we call that, around the child. And we will often use civil orders to do that, so preventative measures on the perpetrators to prevent them having contact with the child. We will always try to take the perpetrator down a criminal justice route so they can answer through the courts. And we're working really closely with CPS so we can all recognise what abuse looks like and how that abuse occurs. Really important for me to emphasise that in all of my investigations, we start with the child cannot consent to their abuse. A child cannot consent to exploitation. So that's the basis of our investigations, and we often work out from that. And we place the onus on the adult rather than the blame on the child.